Hello. It's
Hello.
it's the semifinals. We just went through two banger semifinals. Yeah, and then we're probably gonna have a pretty disappointing finals, but that's not here or there. We've got that for tomorrow. Hi, this is our actual Vision Denial Proper podcast. I'm Sam, and we've
And
got Connor.
hello.
Hello. And for those of you who don't know, this channel is dedicated to international League of Legends competitions. We take a look at everything that happens during MSI and Worlds and the playoffs therein. And this is our episode, I think, 5 of our Vision Denial podcast for Worlds this year.
Yeah, 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
Either way.
And then we'll only have one more, and hopefully Josh will have caught up by then. I don't think he will. He's unfortunately had quite a heavy schedule that just so happened to overlap with Worlds. Maybe we'll get him on the retrospective episode afterwards.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
That said, Connor, how did you enjoy those series?
Been a couple of days now, I guess. Yeah. I really enjoyed actually both of these series. I have to say, they were just all around like enjoyable to watch and interesting. Like I think, like as soon as we get back to like the T1 versus DM1 key, it's like okay, well the true final is what I was calling it, right? Almost, it's like
Yeah.
this is deserving of like a final. The series was just all around like back and forth. There was so much good stuff being done, and you could really tell like it's the game at its finest, like it should be at this point, right? So,
It was like the one semifinals is the fight for first, the other one's the fight for second.
almost, yeah.
Right? I think that from what we saw,
Mhm.
no, not player stats, you little frova. From what we saw out of these two series, I think speaks more to the unfortunate mishap of the format of it. Like these were the most exciting semifinals of World's history, or at least
yeah, they were great.
since season 2. For those who didn't know, season 2 was the inauguration of like the Korean League going into Worlds, and it was also the year that the Taipei Assassins absolutely disappointed Evil Geniuses, who were expected to make it to the finals. Or sorry, it was CLG EU at the time, and then turned Evil Geniuses. So it was also the year that Moscow 5. It was an interesting year, just to say the least. But like we've had very little in terms of exciting semifinals since. Or I think the closest to an exciting semifinals was the Samsung White versus Samsung Blue in 2014, which is like the rematch of the sister teams, where Samsung White had never beaten Samsung Blue in a best of 5 or any series that entire year, and then finally beat them, and that solidified them for the win. But these two semifinals, neither series had any of them expected to be a 5-game series. I sure as hell did not for the T1 versus DAM1. I thought whoever won the first game was going to win 3 in a row. Easy.
Yeah.
Right? 100% happy I was wrong with that. The Gen G versus EDG series is, I think, what would have been technically the third place series.
3 vs 4 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the as fun as these two series were, the I think the general consensus is that this was almost proof of concept that a losers bracket needed to exist. Like imagine a T1
Like
goes up
T1
against
comes back to play them again, kind of thing.
yeah, we have not only two fantastic best of fives, but we get to see that T1 was actually worth of a second place. Because the
Yeah.
way that that would work out is that T1 would then face EDG versus Genji, which most people would have are almost 100% agreeing that T1 would have beaten both of those teams easily.
Right. But that also comes back into, like, I know you mentioned previously other leagues are able to do some loser brackets, that kind of thing. Sure. But Worlds also has more teams in it than any one individual league, right? Like Worlds brings, when you include play-ins and stuff, Worlds has more teams than even like
Has three more teams than the Chinese league.
Chinese
Chinese
League is up
league
to like,
has like 19 teams.
is it 19? Okay. Um, wait, my point is when there's more teams involved, it gets harder. Like Worlds already goes on for a super long time,
Worlds
right?
goes on for a month.
Yeah, which a lot of people would say for a tournament is pretty long.
I think that Spring Split goes on for far too long, and shortening it would benefit Worlds way more. You shorten Spring Split, keep Summer Split the same length, and have Worlds have an extra month.
Yeah, but we're already at the point where like making versus not making Worlds is like the biggest thing. Like for especially for leagues like North America, where it's like we have 4 or 5 teams that are all kind of like moderately similar in power level. So it's not just like okay, we have a top 3 and then everyone else. So it's like it just feels really, really, really bad for the 4th place team already. And if you're just saying like, hey, Worlds is even more of an event, and Worlds is like, you know, an entire split basically, and like it's just that team who just barely didn't qualify for Worlds off one game is like
would be spending the same amount of, I like this is the thing that I don't know, I don't think people notice like the timeline that happens. There is a near 2-month gap for many leagues before Worlds starts. There's 2 whole months for many leagues, and some leagues only have 2 weeks at most on a regular year. With COVID is still like a month. So some of them have 2 months and some have 1 month. If you have a regular Worlds format that starts just a month earlier but ends at the same time, and you end everything else a month earlier, you have changed virtually nothing about the league's like end of the year.
okay.
Right? At most, all you do is you shorten it so that every league has only 1 month when they end. Have it instead of like some playoffs end straight up 4 weeks before others do. I waited a whole month between the end of the Brazilian split to the Japanese split. That's crazy in terms of time. And like the teams in Brazil will have a worse off season if they don't make Worlds than like a European team that's like the 4th place team that doesn't make Worlds. It is not an equal distribution no matter what. If you plan it in a way that's going to be like, oh, it'll feel slightly worse, it's going to feel bad no matter what. But do you want to have an integrity based off of like what feels good for the teams that did not qualify, or what is the most competitive for the teams that did? Because many of the times the teams that did qualify lose off of margins and end up like placing in places that like many people evaluate to be the wrong place for them to be evaluated.
Right.
Like an example, 100 Thieves, it must feel so bad to know that you were likely a better team than Gen G, but never made it out of groups.
Yeah.
Right? Gen G, who made it to the semifinals, and you've got like 100 Thieves going, hey, we know for a fact we're better than Team Liquid, and you barely made it out of groups against them.
Yeah.
So I think it feels worse for teams that have qualified to be put in a format that is not properly evaluating the actual strengths of all the teams, as opposed to other
Sure.
regions who have playoff formats that do properly evaluate their region's strengths to end slightly earlier. I don't know. I think that's that. I've had this thought process forever, but I'm also crazy and watch every single playoff game, and like every international game. So like that would please more me than the casual viewer who only cares to watch an international tournament for a month, and then if their region's gone, then most of them stop watching.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like there are a bunch of memes where like once EDG won, they were like, "Oh great, look, the viewership is not going to plummet for finals."
Oh, yeah, because people from different regions will actually watch it. Yeah.
I was like, "Oh god, that could be solved with like an actual losers bracket." Anywho, um, I want to get your thoughts on what I think is the biggest shakeup of two very different kinds of metas that happen between both of these best of fives.
Okay.
There seemed to be a very big emphasis on, if I remember my notes correctly, so if there was a big emphasis on, I'm going to just double check my notes, on wave manipulation for the T1DK series, and like really hoping to use that as a way to go after neutrals, as opposed to like the amount of coin flip neutral objective focuses that happened for the EDG Gen G series, where that one seemed much more bruisery than the other. And I want to see if there was anything about the pick ban that you noticed between these two series that strikes you as like specifically either unique or different across the board. Because there's only one
Um.
thing that I noticed that was the same before both sides.
Yeah, it is. That definitely was the T1 Dem 1 series. Is they're fighting really for control over the side waves and control over the river, really,
Mm-hmm.
right? The entire game just to be able to get the pushing lane, push into the tower, and then we can fall back to objectives and stuff once everything's pushed out
Yeah.
for a lot of the series. And then it becomes okay, let's try to defend our split pusher or teleport in behind somebody who's pushing a wave to our side of the map. Or that's really what it turned into. Is like it was this kind of back and forth macro of saying, okay, we're pushing top side, you're pushing bottom. Okay, well, how are you countering this? How are we countering this? And that was really cool to watch. How the whole series really was a kind of a macro. It wasn't just like, okay, somebody outplayed somebody or somebody like made this really good mechanical, landed all their skill shots, whatever. Like that's how they won the game, right? It's
Yeah.
like they are the macro decisions being made and like the lane assignments is what is deciding who's able to do this, right? So it's full on. Was the most important thing in the series, which I think is really cool to see because a lot of series you might say like, well, it was a close game and then the Zoe hit 30 straight bubbles in a row and they won, right? Like it's so
Which I think was actually the thing that defined the Gen G EDG series was that kind of statement was like one team near the end hit a certain amount of skill shots way better
yeah,
than
it's
the
like
other.
Klid's Lee Sin, that kind of thing, right? Like
Yeah.
um, it's like Gen G's getting picks and stuff is how they're playing.
Mm-hmm.
But
There was because like it's really easy to just talk about these two series as like one was super brawly, the other one was very macro oriented, but that like doesn't excuse the very intricate team fighting that still happen. Like D1 Dam1 and T1 both still picked what I think were really interesting skirmish and team fight compositions. Um, and the biggest difference is that because everybody remembered like the high quality play that was happening in terms of macro, there wasn't as large of a focus on the team fighting as there was for the other series. I think like the meme was T1 versus DK is a 5-star, 3 Michelin star steak meal, and Gen G versus EDG is like KFC at 4 a.m. Both are really good, and it feels to me like there was a discounting of the quality of team fighting for both of these teams.
Yeah, I really liked just watching, even like going through the pick and bans, like you realizing how like the synergies they're building within their team comps and how they're answering things, right? Because like we've seen Poppy come out as an answer. And that's kind of how these new picks
Yeah.
worked. And it's really cool to see. So like, okay, Poppy answers the Lee Sin and LeBlanc.
Yes.
Right? I can stop what they're doing. I can protect my AD carry from getting bursted by one of them or something. Great. And their answer to that is, okay, you tried to counter us, so we're going Jin Maokai. Which they synergize together so well. Like everything they do, their abilities kind of just match up really nicely. It's like the ultimates are both really long range, and you kind of throw them out like from really far away when you're trying to like get to a dragon or something from, or try to get something. Okay, I can throw out my Maokai ult super far to like try to root someone so that I can then hit them with the Jin ult or different things. Right? They both have the traps and like the bush control, that kind of thing. They don't have to base check bushes or anything. It's like, okay, I check with the sapling, you check with your traps. So they have like chap combo, they have the root combo, which is Maokai's untargetable while he's in his root, so he goes right through a Poppy.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like all of these cool things, the way they're setting it up. Neither of them have like actual dashes, so they aren't stopped by it. They like all of their abilities actually chain together really nicely. And then you have, okay, the Maokai's the one going in with Aftershock, and the Jin can just sit way back, and Maokai can heal himself. So, right? So like the lane just works really cool into what it's doing. And into what they're up against. So it's, yeah, I just really appreciate that. And then it became a lot of like a range matchup, saying like, okay, who can, because both teams are really playing macro and they're playing wide, right?
Yeah.
That's what I call it. They're playing the whole map. They're not just sitting in mid lane and then going to dragon or something. They're playing the whole map. They're playing wide. So because there's this whole essentially horizontal distance to work with, the range becomes much more important because these champions who can either like get out of the side lanes and get back or impact a fight from further away, set up vision, that kind of thing becomes so much more important. It's really cool to see these kinds of things used. Like, okay, we're picking Maokai because we're playing so wide and because we're constantly moving back and forth throughout the jungles and these kind of things. We can't just face check bushes constantly, but he can just check a sapling. Okay, there's no one in there.
Yes.
While moving back and forth, which is something you don't get from a lot of other things, right? Like, if you thresh lantern a bush, okay, it works, but it's also a very long cooldown.
To piggyback on the pick and ban and the dynamics of it, there was one thing that was not dynamic across all 10 games that happened.
Okay.
And some people will argue about one over the other way more intensely depending on your camp.
Okay.
Both Yuumi and Twisted Fate are 10 for 10 in bans, mostly on red side. Mostly. Like teams that prioritize the roaming and global presence will ban Twisted Fate more often. Like T1 and Gen G ban Twisted Fate more often than anything else, but across the board, Yuumi and Twisted Fate were banned all 10 games. So my question here for you is, because I know my answer in terms of Twisted Fate, But do you think this is a warranted amount of pressure, or like priority to ban both of these champions?
That goes back to like the difference between the, professional play versus even, platinum or whatever. It's that, like I think it said in a previous video, when a team fight breaks out, a lot of the times it's, okay, one person died, it's a 4v5. We no longer like this fight. Let's all get out of here.
Yeah.
Right? So we'll see. I have to pull these out. I'd be really curious to see the exact stats of like average deaths per team fight in Worlds. Like it's probably, 1.6 something, maybe. Like there is definitely fights where like, okay, people get caught and then all five people die.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it's like that kind of number, right? Because we'll see a lot of fights where like it's a 5v5, all 10 ultimates get blown and no one dies because everybody just peeled back and said, okay, right? And that happens a lot. So the difference is then that with the Twisted Fate and Yuumi, what they do is, yes, Twisted Fate is the global, so we can get to the side lanes early at level 6 and you can do all these things, and that's all great. But the other thing is, as soon as you can get that rapid fire, and he earns a lot of gold, right? He earns more gold than anyone else with his passive, so we can get to these item spikes faster than a lot of the champions, and then just that rapid fire gold card has such a long range to it, right? What is it, like 500 times 1.35? It's like whatever, 750 or something, 700. It's really long.
Yeah.
So, and it's a fairly long stun, meaning that when it's a fight where only one person's dying, if I'm able to get off that rapid fire gold card on someone, my entire team can now follow up on that. And it just is able to lock someone down so reliably again and again and again and again, because there's not that much you can do. It's just it's an on click with a super long range, right? You can't really do much about that. You can't dodge it. You can't do anything about it. And it's not like the Maokai is like the tiny little range that right? It's like whatever, 350 range or something. It's twice as far, right? Which is huge. And Twisted Fate just locks someone down so reliably. And when it becomes that, okay, if I can just gold card the enemy AD carry, my entire team jumps in, we win this fight. And there's really nothing you can do about it. Like, sure, you can cleanse it, but my gold card's back off cooldown in like, what, 8 seconds or something? Like, less at high level.
Right.
It's so reliable at doing what it does, and just I click on an enemy carry or their jungler. If we want to do Baron, cool. I gold card their jungler, we blow them up. Now Baron's safe. It's just so reliable at doing what it does. And then Yuumi is kind of similar in the sense that, well, one, she can't get picked off by that. So it's another, it's an enchanter, and she does all the stuff an enchanter would normally do. But the main problem with an enchanter normally is they get caught. They are very squishy, and they don't have dashes or anything. There's not a single one. For Khan, if you call him an enchanter. Enchanters can't get away or anything. So if an enchanter gets like gold carded by a Twisted Fate, they can't do much. They're just going to get blown up in half a second and die. Yuumi doesn't have that weakness, but you can save someone and provide the buffs just as reliably. So that's kind of why, in my opinion, we're seeing Yuumi Rakan as the go-tos, because Rakan can actually get away from things and can save himself. He's the enchanter. Who's the enchanter with the mobility, essentially, and Yuumi is untargetable. So she does everything you'd want from another. It's not like Yumi's better than Soraka. It's that, okay, well, if Yumi's just as good as Soraka, but Soraka is super easy to catch out and, can't get away from things, whereas Yuumi can be anywhere she wants to be. Right? And it's that ability, because we're playing teleports and these kind of things, Yuumi can just jump on the person who's teleporting. And then
no, that's been patched out. That doesn't work.
Oh, really? They removed the patch for it? Okay.
Yeah. So
you
can't teleport with somebody.
Okay. My apologies if I did not realize that had been changed. That explains why I haven't seen that being done recently.
Yeah, no, actually, that was mentioned even on a stream. One of the casters had mentioned it, that was a patch that was done near a year ago, I think.
Right, but Yuumi can still like Shen ult in or something. Well, I mean, that's not a...
No, it can't. Any teleports won't apply.
Oh. Interesting. So she can't be like attached to a Twisted Fate or anything?
No, I think many of the things that would usually on paper you would think would teleport through don't anymore. The only exception to that, I think, is still the Akali.
Interesting. But yeah, because it's not really a teleport. It's just a
really long movement. There's no way to really patch that out.
Yeah, same with like if you get attached to like a Leona E as someone recalls or something.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. But that's the idea, right? It's like I can be on somebody mobile, and I can all of a sudden I'm a mobile enchanter now because
Mhm.
Yumi has a dash technically, 'cause she just dashes to her allies. So it's all the things you'd want from an enchanter plus crazy mobility and doesn't get caught.
I would
Awesome,
argue
right?
the Poppy stops that still, though. I'm pretty sure Poppy's W W stops the Yumi movement.
Right, but if I'm playing into a Poppy or something, chances are as the Yumi, I'm on my Aphelios or I'm on my Jin or something,
Mm-hmm.
on my Ezreal, way super far back, right? And then I can jump forward if I need to later or something.
I say I love that you mentioned the Aphelios, but like Aphelios was present 10 out of the 10 games. How many games do you think he was picked?
He was banned most of them, right?
He was banned 9 out of 10 games.
Yeah. Remember that I was watching that. I was like, oh, really?
So
The Aphelios ban
that
constant.
was the next thing I was going to go to. Yumi keeps being banned, even as Aphelios keeps getting banned. Who is Yumi benefiting, like aiding, in any of the picks that are remaining afterwards? Because there's Yumi Misfortune, but Misfortune was largely missing.
Animate. Yeah. Although, to be fair, if you got the Yumi, you might take the Misfortune with it
Mm-hmm.
if it had gone through. Um, I mean, Misfortune,
Misfortune still went through
Drill.
with Lulu,
Yeah.
right? I don't think that was the. I don't think that was a thing necessarily about like. So like Misfortune was present in. From what I can see here, 5, 1, 2. Yeah, it looks like 5 out of the 10 games was in 50% of the games still, and yet still had a lower presence than the Aphelios and the Yumi together, which indicates to me that that every team that has made it to the semifinals at this point thinks that the Aphelios alone, despite the fact that the Aphelios needs quite a bit of like aid in the early game, and that the Yumi alone, which despite the fact that Yumi requires good synergy with at least 2 other champions, all of which are being banned literally round 1, to me thinks that one of these 3 champions is being banned too quickly. Because
Um,
Aphelios and Yumi get banned literally first on almost all of these occasions before having seen anything else. And oftentimes you'll see both the team that banned Yumi also ban the Aphelios. As if there's not enough information to see what else is going to be picked through when these bans are going to go through. And it makes it seem like there is something about these champions that is so strong that regardless of the types of matchups or the things that they're paired up with, you couldn't let it through no matter what, which feels antithetical to the current situation. Like I'm
I feel
agreeing
like
in terms of the Twisted Fate
okay.
priority,
Mhm.
because Twisted Fate has historically just been an equalizer of every kind of team composition that you want. But the Aphelios require so much gold to be funneled in that the usual matchups that added on to were like Thresh, Lulu, Yumi as things that would help it survive through the laning phase to then like enable it later down the line. But without any of the information of like what the rest of the composition is going to be, the team that ended up with Aphelios still lost because it did not have the tools to be able to enable it. Now that wasn't like a one-sided game by any matter of speaking, but it did not have the same kind of tools, right? Literally, Damwon banned Yumi and Twisted Fate and then Lee Sin as well, but did not ban the Aphelios. And T1 just decided, oh, we're blue side, we're just going to pick Aphelios, as if they also
I
believed it was going to be a high priority on something.
the only caveat I would make to that, I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you, is that when we're talking about an individual series versus like a tournament as a whole, a lot of the time it's an individual player. And I think what this comes down to is it's saying, like Gumayusi is a younger player, kind of things, and he is most comfortable on Aphelios versus any other champ in the game. So it's coming down to, hey, so he's a rookie, right?
No.
Yeah.
This is not his first year.
Okay, well, we have a much younger player in a big high stakes game. We're going to get them on what they're most comfortable with and what they know they can do the best on. So it's them saying, hey, his stats on Aphelios are much better than any other AD carry, right? So if we can, we're going to get him Aphelios. If Aphelios is even, if it's like on an even tier with everything else, and it's like these 5 champions are the options we would take, but we're most comfortable on Aphelios, and it's still like that A tier, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take it. And I was looking at it, and it's like, I don't know if it's the same thing, but like for Viper, because he usually plays Aphelios, Callista, Kaisa, was what he played a lot of.
Yes.
So like if Callista and Kaisa aren't meta currently, that goes down to, yeah, Aphelios is his most comfortable champion too. So it might be, okay, the other team's saying, okay, well, he wants Aphelios probably because we don't, Callista and Kaisa aren't issues or aren't really meta. So that becomes his top choice. Therefore, that's what we ban. So if that's both of these two series, perhaps.
Except
right?
EDG also banned Aphelios on a frequent basis. They EDG in their series, having Viper, banned Aphelios. They were the team that banned Aphelios 5 for 5 games. So I don't think that applies anymore. Right? It's not like Ruler is a world champion to begin with already. He's got tenure, experience, all the rest. If that was the argument and Viper was like, "Oh, this is one of the 3 that I'm the most comfortable with," why would on blue side every time they would not let him try to take it? They banned it every time.
That is fair. I know the Gumayusi thing is for sure, like, he is most comfortable on Aphelios. That was discussed for a while. The second half of that was more conjecture, like, hey, this is a possible reason.
Yep.
I am glancing through it though. Like, Aphelios did have over the whole year, which is obviously a very long time, but he had a 66% win rate in the LCK over the whole year,
Yep.
which is a ton, right? Like, that's really, really high. So if we're seeing 3 LCK teams, and they're all, chances are a lot of them are saying, hey, Aphelios has been really strong consistently.
Aphelios has a win rate of 58.6% in the tournament, in the main stage.
It's still good. You'd still call that, pretty decent.
LeBlanc has a higher win rate. Has the champion with the highest win rate that is not like a one-time pick ban is Lysandra. And then Kennen. And then Syndra, Jhin, Kiana, Wukong. You start, some of them are like fewer picks than others, but if you were to do win rate, then by number of games also. Oh, this thing just doesn't let you do more than one at the same time. Great. The champion with what looks like to be the highest win rate with a similar amount of games that are like pretty high to play is Jhin Rakan. Like, and then there's LeBlanc. LeBlanc gets banned a fairly similar amount of time. And I think the LeBlanc win rate has more to do with like the tenure of the mid laners that we've had this year. That's just a crazy amount. But the emphasis on the support and bottom lane with all of these like this emphasis on like a bot lane banning or mid lane banning, I don't think win rate is a metric to work with. I don't even think that like dynamics is a thing to work with. I just think that there has to be some sort of decision about these teams not knowing how to deal with these champions 100% of the time, and they're avoiding that risk. And I'm of the mindset that the Yumi is being banned too much. The Aphelios is being banned too quickly. And Twisted Fate being banned on Red Side is like a tried and true League of Legends history.
I think also what that comes down to a little bit with Aphelios is it's saying, okay, we are playing these very intricate, very controlled team fights, these kind of things, right? We are, when we're at this level, the players on both sides are saying, we understand exactly how much damage I do, how much damage you do. Okay, you've used this cooldown, so you've like they're understanding what is going on in a very general sense, right? So they know, okay, this is what you're capable of doing, right? And Aphelios is that little bit of saying like, well, he could be behind by a lot, but if he gets a huge stack of crescendoms, he could be down by an entire item and he'll still 1v1 you and win if he gets the right setup and the right guns for that exact situation.
Right.
Right? You step into the turret and take a bunch of damage. There's a really funny thing where I think someone, who was it? Someone tried, I think it was LeBlanc, tried to like recall or teleport when like they killed the entire enemy team, but she was sitting on an Aphelios turret and she just got one-shotted by the Aphelios turret while trying to teleport. So funny. I think it was like Genji is not was it Damwon as they won, like as they won game 5 after they'd already killed everyone. But it was just really funny. Like, yeah. You teleported on top of the Aphelios turret and just died to the turret during like it just does that, right? So he does things that are. It's hard to say exactly how much damage an Aphelios is doing, right? So if I'm playing into the Aphelios, it's saying, okay, this is how much damage a normal AD carry does. Well, Aphelios can slightly beat that if I'm too close to his crescendoms, or if he has, gets a Gravitum ult, it can like set up for a CC we weren't expecting.
Right.
Or there's a lot of different. Aphelios can do so much and he's so versatile that it makes it hard to say this is exactly what the enemy team is capable of doing at any given moment. Especially when he's like off vision and like you don't know what guns he has or something.
Right.
He's hard to keep track of exactly. Okay, well, they can't burst Baron, I don't think. Well, all of a sudden maybe they can, right? Like you always have to be like, well, what if he did switch to Crescendoms and Severum when we weren't looking and is there? Like you have to account for so many more things than you do with a lot of other AD carries. He's like, okay, well, they can't catch us. Like whatever, they have a Thresh. He can't probably catch us because landing a blind hook is just not something you really do with professional play with like no setup or anything. Well, all of a sudden it's just Gravitum ult, sets that up. Now Thresh pulls our whole entire team in, kind of thing, right? There's these kinds of things, right? Like there's a lot of things that he can do that you have to account for.
So, just as a fun fact, just as like context, the presence that Twisted Fate and Yuumi have in the main stage is that there's only 3 games in the entirety of groups and bracket stage that they aren't accounted for.
Yep.
But across play-ins, including for 116 games, the only champion that has 3 games missing under their belt is Lee Sin. The presence of Yuumi and Twisted Fate across the whole thing rises the second that the main stage starts, the group stage and bracket stage. Which is why it is like I mentioned that there was going to be a huge shift of the meta going from play-ins to groups and like from groups to bracket. I just think that it's weird that the adaptation of that meta isn't something drastically new. It is the removal of something at such an aggressive pace. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I can understand a priority on finding strategies around this, like any of these champions. It is just more surprising to me that that kind of level of attention is not brought over to things like Lucian, LeBlanc. Like, as if there is something specific about the way that these champions play that is that you can't work around at all. Like, I get, like, it is hard to determine the damage that a Aphelios is going to do. Mostly. I don't know if I 100% agree with that mostly, primarily because their interaction, there's only 10 gun interactions.
Sure.
Right.
But compared to most any other champ in the game, like if it's a Jinx or a Caitlyn or something coming at me, it's like, okay, I know exactly what she can do to a certain extent. Aphelios, sure, yes. But I think most League players in general would likely agree with the statement. To make a poll or something. But I think League players in general would agree with the statement that Aphelios is the one champion where it's like, you're not always 100% sure of what exactly he can do.
Right.
Now, professional players obviously have a lot of experience with him and should know exactly what he can do.
But that's the
But it's
thing.
still, you're accounting for 10, most champions have 4 abilities, maybe a passive, so like maybe 5 things. Aphelios has double that. So you have to account for twice as much.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
You have to account for. You have to account for what I think is only. There's only actually 8 interactions between the guns. Some of the guns don't interact with each other.
okay, yes, but it's still, even if it's just like what he has as a secondary, because there's little things, right? Like one of his secondaries is a slow, one of his secondaries is a heal. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna go fight him. Oh wait, his secondary is lifesteal. He was able to heal himself more than I was expecting him to.
Yeah, I mean, like the
Like these,
casters
I
will
know
talk.
these little things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think the casters will keep talking about it. I was like, why are you opting into a team fight and a red-white gun, Aphelios? That's a bad idea.
well, the other thing is his secondary stats are his choice. So it's like Aphelios can all of a sudden choose to have a bunch of lethality,
Yeah.
and you have no way of knowing that he chose to take lethality. Unless you're like trying to math out his stats and looking at it, which you obviously can't do during the game. So it's like he could all of a sudden have a bunch of lethality because that's what he chose to take, and you don't even see that in his items necessarily,
Right.
right? You're just like, oh, he had a bunch of lethality. I didn't know about that. That doesn't like show up. I don't see that in his items. So, or oh, he chose to take attack speed. Like your interactions with him are different based on what stats he has, and you don't even there's no way of knowing which stat Nathelios took unless you're like mapping out his attack speed or something. Which, who does that during a game, right?
You'd be very surprised how many people actually do that in the game. I would expect at a high level play for most of these ADCs are likely going to do that. Right? Many players in game who have played a champion a bunch of times will do that.
I guess yeah, it's less mapping it out and it's more just knowing the numbers. So it's like, okay, if he has this item plus attack speed, he would be at 1.06 and he's at 1.1. So therefore he must have taken some. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what it is, right? He would be at 1.06 and he's at 1.1 instead. So therefore he did take some attack speed. Oh yeah.
It's not like a complicated setup. I think it's more of because like the surface level issues that are really easy to spot out. I think there's counterplay. I'm just wondering what is the thing, because it's usually not something super surface level that is causing, like it's rare in my opinion. Like there's 2 scenarios that usually happen that I find that people find out afterwards in terms of like interviews or conferences and whatever. People will find out that they ban certain champions for something either incredibly mundane that have nothing to do with something that's innate about the kit. They'll be like, "Oh, like the champion's just annoying." That's it. They'll have no other thought. They'll just be like, "It's annoying," and so they ban it because it's annoying. Or they have something about that champion that straight up ruins a strategy that they think is completely successful every single time. And it's a lot more complicated in terms of a macro oriented sense. And I'm just baffled by which one it would be. And it would be I would think it would suck if it was just like, oh, these champions are just annoying. I would hate it if it was something mundane.
I think one of the other things is Aphelios is good into Misfortune.
Yeah, so Misfortune didn't get that much priority anyways.
She was in priority, and then we saw Aphelios being used as a counter to Misfortune.
Mm-hmm.
So then it becomes, okay, if we ban Aphelios, we can actually pick Misfortune to like try to set ourselves up in Misfortune Yumi or something. Or it also becomes like, okay, well, let's not pick Misfortune because Aphelios is an option into it.
Right, but then I'm gonna just double check something, because like that thought process sounds correct on paper, but then the Misfortune is like present in almost none of them. What gains in priority from this, though, what I saw was more Lucian, Jin, and Ziggs. There was some misfortune. I think that's, I don't know. There's a part of me that wonders
Miss
what.
Fortune was the top AD carry for a while, right? Like she was like the number one automatic go-to
Yes.
for group stage and that kind of thing. So I think what we saw is, hey, Aphelios is good into Miss Fortune, and people are saying like, okay, we can't just blind pick Miss Fortune when they can just go Aphelios into it.
True.
I think what that comes down to a little bit is most other AD carries, if it's just like AD carries, and you're like maybe an Asher or Varus can like cancel the Miss Fortune ult with their ult, but it's like they expended their ult to do that. Aphelios is just like, okay, Gravitum Q, I canceled your ult. So he can cancel your biggest, strongest thing with his Q, which there's no other AD carries at least that just have the ability to cancel that with their generic abilities on like a low cooldown.
I get that. I just there's just something about because I look at this in terms of holistic pick ban rate, right? And like what happens with the team that bans Aphelios? What do they pick in their stead? There's no consistency. There's literally nothing. Nothing here indicates any consistency as to misfortune being the answer afterwards, because you're able to do so because there's no Aphelios or like anything here then after. I just there was something that these four teams realized 10 for 10 games, Twisted Fate, Aphelios, and Yuumi needed to go. And all four of these teams have very distinct play styles that are very unique to each other. That, like, sure, there's some overlap, but their approaches to all of those overlaps are drastically different. And that's the thing that is baffling me more.
I think that comes down to like the lanes. So it's saying like, okay, we're not. Nami is good specifically with Lucian or Akshan, which is not in the tournament, but I'm just mentioning it because Nami Akshan is gross. But so like if Lucian's banned or taken elsewhere, we don't necessarily need or want Nami, right? So we don't need to waste a ban on Nami if we can just take away Lucian, for example, right? And then it becomes the same thing with like, okay, Misfortune plus Yuumi is really good. Well, if we can ban, because we've seen the other things like, okay, Misfortune, Amumu not working, right? A lot of these kind of things. Still decent with Leona and some stuff, but like our go-to that is much safer is Misfortune Yuumi, and that had a really high win rate. These kinds of things, right? So saying, okay, maybe if Misfortune is not the go-to way to carry, and we're gonna try to get Lucian Nami, or we're gonna try to get Misfortune Yuumi, but if they ban the Yuumi, well, maybe it's not necessarily worth trying to take the Misfortune just with a Braum or something. That's right. So we're shutting down the lanes as a whole.
Here's the only thing that I came through every time that I wrote my notes for these pick and bans. The only thing that ever came across my mind as to the reason why either of them were being picked or banned was not because of lane, not because of like individual interactions or whatever. I think it was more because of jungle choke point fights.
Okay.
Because if you look at also the other bans that happen across the board from all of these, right? You have, so you go Aphelios, Yuumi, Nami, Syndra, Graves, Twisted Fate. All of which benefit from choke point fights. Many of their, right? Rise, Yuumi, Twisted Fate, Aphelios, Jarvan, Lucian. 4 of those benefit from choke point fights. Of those 4, 3 of them are again the Yuumi, Aphelios, Twisted Fate.
Yeah.
Then you got Aphelios, Yuumi, Nami, Lee Sin, Graves, Twisted Fate. Almost an exact replica of the first game picks and bans for round 1, except you put Lee Sin instead of Syndra. Lee Sin is meant for neutral fights or also choke point fights. Game 4, the same exact bans again. Game 5, you've got LeBlanc, Lee Sin, Jarvan, Yuumi, Rise, Twisted Fate. The Aphelios is then picked in that game. And I kid you not, a Kennen, a Jinzhou, an Azir, and a Zillion, 4 or 5 of those benefit from choke point fights. I think
Yeah.
a lot of these teams are finding that the best opportunities to do team fights now are in jungle choke points.
Yep. Entrances to dragons, kind of things. It's always been. Yeah.
And that was, I think, to me, I think
Yeah.
it's the
There's not as
only.
much like we're gonna fight you in mid lane.
Yeah.
Like that just it doesn't happen because these teams are saying like, well, I don't need to fight you in mid lane. I don't need to risk anything here.
Mm-hmm.
What do I have to gain from this, really? Right? Like it's
Yeah. So, like, if
yeah,
any of these teams were focusing on a strictly split push competition, 1-3-1, Yumi as a band feels very eh. If they were doing large scale 5v5 team fights, Twisted Fate would feel kind of eh. It's like, what part of literally all 3 of these champions' presence 10 for 10 across the board? That's the thing that was racking my brain as to, like, oh, you could rationalize a higher priority on Yumi being like combination of how it interacts in lanes or in some skirmishes. Twisted Fate has always been a tried and true red side ban, sometimes blue side, because of its global map pressure. Aphelios being rising in pressure is the thing that was the weirdest aspect to me, because Twisted Fate and Yumi together felt slightly strange, but Yumi has been touted as like rise in priority, and all 4 of these teams have some experience being good at side lane pressure. But the Aphelios added in was the thing that made me question why the Yumi and Twisted Fate had such high priority. And
yeah,
to me, I think it's because jungle fighting became the go-to. Because side lanes, wave manipulation, super easy to manage. People tend to not get caught out, and nobody's doing a specific split push comp. There hasn't been one in these semifinals. In every bracket game that has happened, I'm pretty sure the team that did the 1-4 composition lost. I think there's like
yeah. That's
one
yeah, because we
expectation.
haven't. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say the Aurelia disappeared.
Yep. Right? Like, there's so much that was a staple of the rest of the tournament that disappeared in these 2 best of 5s. And so, like, because if we were to go to the previous sets of best of 5s, right? Uh, Aphelios is present in 2 of 3 games for the C9 Genji. In the, let's see here, Mad versus DK, Aphelios is only present in 2 of the 3 instead of all 5. No, I'm wrong.
Again,
It's
depends.
present in all 3 of 3, but is present on the side of the team that banned the Yumi and Twisted Fate. And, like, I'm taking a look at these, and the same kind of presence. Yumi is not banned in the EDG RNG for all 5 games. And that went to 5 games. Heck, it is picked frequently by the side of EDG, of all things, who won. And it wasn't like a 100% win rate every time it got picked. In fact, it lost 2 of 3 times. 2 out of 4 times. And then you have, Aphelios shows up in every T1 versus Humble Life game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like Team One. We're seeing T1 was consistently first picking Aphelios every single time they possibly could.
Yep. And
Right, and that's comes down to like the players and stuff too, right? They're saying, okay, because well, like Faker can play anything, right? We don't need to get him priority because if he needs to play, you know, a set or an Aurelia or a, you know, Ari, he will, and he'll be fine because he's Faker. But Gubiusis was saying like, hey, the difference between him being on Aphelios, which is amazing at, versus anything else, at least exists, right? So it's like, okay, we've played around this, we're most comfortable on this. Let's get Aphelios every single time we can get.
I think the thing that, like, really I think, like, probably clicked in a lot of people's heads was the places in which team fights are more happening now as a consequence.
Yep. And realistically, Damwon was also the very first team who said, okay, they're just consistently first picking Aphelios. Why don't we ban it? Which they did 4 out of 5 games.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, we're watching their previous series. They're going for the Aphelios every single time they can. Okay, let's not give them what they want. Right.
I think that I think what happened is that because most of the team fights happened in river or in choke points and not in mid lane, rarely did they start happening in mid lane or in open spaces where team fights are easy to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
People not accidentally, but like stumbled upon a need to change their compositions to benefit from that and to get rid of anything that would give that priority. Right? Because there's like a reduction in terms of like Gragas and Galio, Silas. There's like as the best of fives go down the list, many of the more I would say flavorful picks go away, like almost entirely. The most flavorful pick that we get, that are banned at this point happen in round 2 bans, and they tend to be targeted towards, I would say, like the top lane or the bot lane on a frequent basis. Everything else seems your stock standard. These are always the good champs every world championship for the last 11-ish years. They'll have like a Draven ban every so often. Yeah. There's one Draven ban. That was the funniest thing. Yeah. So, I think this is a good spot then to go with. Is there anything that you think will change in terms of these pick bans from the next games? Because we had 2 very different best of 5s. Do you think that Damwon or EDG are going to change the approach to their round 1 bans? Or do you think that we're going to still see more Yuumi, Twisted Fate, Aphelios, and LeBlanc, if possible?
Yeah, Yuumi, Twisted Fate, LeBlanc, they stay. They're being, I think, possibly less Aphelios. I do think that, having seen the last series, just like T1 was like, okay, our go-to, that our, dream team comp kind of thing is just getting the Aphelios and set up a position where we have the tools to allow Aphelios to carry, right? And it's like, whatever, Aphelios LeBlanc is what our go-to if we can, right? Mm-hmm. EDG's go-to is the Lucian Nami. We saw that consistently, right? That's what they've been trying to go to all tournament whenever they can get it.
Yeah.
Right? So I do expect that Damwon, based on how they kind of read what T1 wanted to do and said, okay, this is what they want. Let's not give them their first choice ever.
Right.
So I do think that Damwon is going to, this is my prediction, Damwon is going to ban, because the Nami is kind of fine by itself, Damwon is going to ban the Lucian, or possibly even like try to first pick it away, is what I expect.
Okay. I think that specifically, I think the Aphelios ban is going to drop in priority completely. I think the Kennen round 1 ban is actually going to rise in priority.
Okay. So let's see. Your prediction is a Kennen round ban? Kennen round 1? My prediction is a Lucian ban round 1.
Yeah, because many of the times the Kennen was used as a round 2 ban. But way after a team fight had already been, like a team fight composition had already been established, and it was very easy to swap in for what was needed. So instead, banning the Kennen early on prevents any round 1 Kennens to be picked, which usually supplements an Aphelios, if they're ever going to be picked with the Aphelios. But I agree in terms of probably going to be a rise in Lucian bans.
Okay. That's the prediction. Damwon bans Lucian, specifically.
Yeah, I think that that EDG is gonna ban Kennen
Okay.
more
So yeah,
often.
like if Damwon has like the blue side and they get that first pick, there's a possibility they might just say, you know what, we're fine with Lucian, so let's prevent them from getting the bot lane they want.
Mm-hmm.
And because we are still comfortable and fine with taking Lucian.
Yeah.
Right. So
Now I think we're both in agreement that Damwon's gonna win.
yeah.
I think that anybody who says otherwise is really fanboying hard. It'd be very hard pressed to look at both of those series and think that they were of the same caliber, and think that EDG is going to bring it. My question then to you is: do you think that EDG will win a game?
Yes.
Okay.
I do think they win. One game is my prediction. I could kind of see two. I think it's between the things that like they're good at, right? Like it's not just like okay, one thing you can shut down. It is like, you know, the Lee Sin is an issue. The Zoe can be a massive issue. The Lucian Nami bot lane can be a big issue, right?
Right.
The
Yeah.
Kennen or this, like they have threats across the map, and they have a lot of options and ways of doing that. So I think, yeah, I'd say that's like their probably like go-to team comp that they're afraid of is like the, you know, uh, Lucian, Nami, Zoe, Lee Sin, Kennen kind of thing, for example. But I don't think they're going to get that, but enough of that to be a threat kind of thing, right? Like, and sometimes the game just does come down to, well, you know, if a Zoe or a LeBlanc is able to stack up a Magi's, it can be very hard to deal with, for example, right?
Right.
And that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't think they'll win a game, but there is
okay.
only one avenue that I think they will. And this is something I don't think a lot of people have noticed, is that Damwon is a slower team than EDG.
Okay.
In terms of pacing, not necessarily in terms of when the game ends. Damwon are much more content at waiting until they have solidified like a higher percent win condition than like opting into accelerating the game. While EDG will frequently opt into accelerating the game regardless of if there's a lead or not. And in the event that EDG find early leads is the only time that I think they might win.
Yeah, I think my opinion on Damwon is the best team in the world, not because of what they're good at, but because of what they're bad at. Damwon is the best team in the world because they are the best team at accepting small losses. We've talked about this before.
Yep.
A lot of teams where it's like, hey, our top laner is getting dove 3v1. Crap, we need to double teleport in and try to save the play. A lot of teams are like, hey, the enemy team, like, whatever, is going to get a free Rift Herald. We need to, like, teleport everyone in and, like, do everything we can to try to stop them, to not give them something for free. When Damwon, they'll look to say, okay, is there something we can do? And if they're saying, you know what, it's a 3v1 dive, we're not really in the position to do something about this, let's give it up. They get a kill. It's one kill. It happens. Damwon accepts when they're not able to do something about a play. Like if they're saying, okay, you know what, they have the positioning advantage here. Let's not contest this because this is like a 40-60 kind of thing, right? Where like they are more likely to win, so let's not do this. They accept the small losses. They say like, you know what, we can't contest this Rift Herald, but while they're doing this, let's get a couple tower plates bottom lane. So by the time they've dropped the Rift Herald, well, we've already matched it because we took the plates bottom lane while you were doing that, right? They accept a death or an objective. They'll concede what they can't win much better than anyone else. And they say, okay, if we concede this, what do we do instead? They play that full map, and they will give you small things, and they'll not throw the game over small things. They're not going to throw the game on a second dragon ever. You know what I mean? Like these kinds of things other teams will do.
Right.
And that's the difference, right? So it means like if you're doing it right, like they are in theory beatable. Then if you're able to, okay, they'll accept and let you dive top lane. So if you're able to like really press a lead in one spot and get that going, um, will they be countering it on the other side of the map for sure? And then it becomes a question of who did it better and stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm. I I think that part of it is also that um, it's not that they'll just like minimize losses. I think is that they will do things that on paper look like they're not contesting, but they'll be setting up for what is a uncontestable stronger gain.
yeah, they're always doing something else. They're not just saying like, hey, we took a loss here. They're saying, okay, well, maybe you have a better setup on Rift Herald, but Dragon spawns in 20 seconds. So let's drop a line of control wards through the river, set up, and now like, okay, you may have had this, but now we have an uncontestable dragon or
Yep,
something, right? Like they're
exactly.
always doing something to say, okay, well, what is the rest of the map doing? If we don't win in this exact spot here, how do we win the rest of the map? So usually it'll be like, usually what happens is if you make a play top lane, well, chances are Damwon is winning mid and bot.
Which I think says a lot about the way that a lot of the other teams have approached the game, which is if it's any of the higher quality tiered teams, so like, oh, this is slightly rude. Any of the LPL teams and T1
Yep.
is regardless of the quality of that they had played in during the tournament, is that throughout the year it was a high emphasis on controlling the pace and putting pressure at all given points.
Yep.
And I think Damwon has conceded the idea that putting pressure all the time leaves moments of vulnerability that could be worse down the line, as opposed to just opting in to wait until they can have full control of a section of the map.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the difference. So there's a point in that series where T1 blows like all of their like first ultimates and like flash on top, mid, and jungle
Yep.
to get a kill in the top lane. So they spend 3 flashes to get a kill, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Damwon is a team that says like, okay, sure, maybe you got that, but they're saying, okay, well, you spent so many resources doing this, right? What do we get in event? And they're able to get like even these little things that you don't, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's okay. Well, now they're able to pressure and get the push advantage on mid lane for the next couple of minutes because they have the flash advantage mid lane.
Yeah.
Right. Which T1 now has to respect. Right. So it's like a lot of these little things, maybe it wasn't a play. They didn't get a dive mid lane or they didn't necessarily kill Faker while he was flashless, but they're able to pressure him and maybe cause him to lose a couple of CS. These little things you don't necessarily catch in like the highlight reel because of the fact that they have the flash advantage.
There is a lot more meticulous, slow siphoning of advantages
Exactly. Yeah.
until one
Like,
large advantage is like 100% in their control, and then it looks like they're so clean all the time.
yeah. It's like you can't contest this caster minion because you dive top lane. Okay, it looks like an advantage for you because you got the successful dive top lane, but I keep doing this for 5 minutes. Right? So
and then eventually you've gained 300 gold, but you've lost 700, and I've gained like 600. Congratulations, you've played yourself. Because I think it's a very different approach to the way that most teams are conditioned to play.
Yep.
Yeah. But given that T1 is also the only other team that is very meticulous about their wave management, that's why it's the only team that has been so consistent at contesting anything Damwon does.
Yep. Because if T1 is going for the play, they're specifically saying, hey, is the bottom wave in a good position to allow us to make a play on the opposite side of the map?
Yeah.
Right? Which a lot of the North American teams, for example, are not worried about bot lane when they're diving top.
I don't know
That's the
why.
difference.
Like, why would they ever be?
It's the opposite side of the map. It doesn't matter. Right? with the exception, and I think it's part of why the exception of Cloud9. But what Cloud9 does is they're saying, I have to deal with bot wave always before
Right.
I go deep,
Yeah.
right? So they will. Oh, this is what we said, right? Cloud9 is better at worrying about all the other lanes states in the map, and that's what makes them better against some of the other teams, like because they are going to worry about what's going on bot lane. But at the same time, when there's an actual team fight, well, they lose the team fight because Perk stayed to kill his cannon minion before teleporting,
Yeah. Like
right?
they're the it is like they have all the right pieces. They're always just disjointed.
That happened several times.
Yeah.
It's Perks or Fudge stayed to kill a cannon minion. It's like, okay, yes, but 3 people in your team died for that cannon. Anyway, we've discussed that before.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been said.
Yeah. uh, I will then say, because as the finals happens, the MVP of the tournament happens before the actual finals happens, because you don't evaluate who the MVP is after the finals has happened. It's never been the case. Who in your mind is the tournament MVP?
Can I say, from a narrative standpoint, right?
Sure.
And the even like what's going on outside the games and stuff too. I want to, and it would feel good to give it to Khan.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just from that, it's his last tournament kind of thing, and it is a reasonable argument to say he deserves it. Now you could argue, other players over him, but I think from that perspective, from saying okay, Showmaker could win it next year, kind of thing. So.
I want to give it to Canyon. Specifically because of how much of the tournament has been hinged on the control of neutral objectives overall. And he's been the most consistent jungler through the entire tournament.
He has, for sure. And he's done a lot. I just think there's also been a lot of times where Khan's Kennen and stuff has just full out changed games.
Or his Lucian.
Right? Exactly, right? He's made the big highlight plays for his team, which even if, Canyon's been doing all of these little small things consistently the entire tournament. I think people are going to remember the Khan highlights and stuff.
Yes.
The flash cannon ults and the, Lucian, quadra kills and stuff. Yeah, people are going to remember that. And then plus from a narrative standpoint, I think that's the answer. But it also depends in the finals too, right? So
no, MVPs I'm pretty sure are determined before finals.
Oh, it is before finals.
Yeah, every time MVP is determined before the grand finals.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd vote Khan. But yeah.
Yeah. That said,
As much as I am a support me.
It's very hard to say that Beryl would be MVP.
Yeah.
His presence in the game is not as strong as say Keria. Just in general, Keria I think is the highlight of supports. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's I think that's
if
yeah, go ahead.
If EDG wins finals for whatever reason, I feel like there's an argument to give it to Mako.
Okay. I can see that.
That's just a statement.
Just
Leave it at
that. I would definitely think you'd give it to Scout if they did win, though.
Okay.
Yeah. With that, I think that we've covered the entirety of semifinals, even if we didn't go it game by game. and what we expect out of the finals. To those who watch, super appreciate you watching, even
Thank you.
all the way to this point and throughout the entire year. We may have, I will definitely have one more video after finals, and then maybe one more after that in terms of our Vision Denial podcast for like a retrospective of like the year. But thank you for watching. Super appreciate it. Let us know what you thought about the semifinals, the picks and bans, and all that stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts from that. And do also from my daily sweeper videos. Again, go support the VCS channel for like all the highlights that I put for them, and they need some of the support. They haven't been able to participate for for the last 2 years. Do that. Shout out to them. And hopefully by our next Vision Denial podcast, we'll have Josh in. Fingers crossed. Or at least he'll want to talk about like the next coming moves for roster stuff in the next year.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
With that, I say thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time then.
See you soon.